If my only goal were to be published, then I should not write. You should write because you want to write. You should write because you want to express your thoughts, your ideas. But if your goal is to be published, that's not a good enough reason.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Worldwide. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being here. Today's episode is about channeling your passion into writing. And I sat down with an author who certainly does that in each and every one of her books. Joining me on the show was Annette Berkovits. Annette has several books. We discussed her first memoir, which was the story of her father escaping the Nazis out of Poland and ending up in a Russian prison camp, and his story of hope and courage and strength. And that was her book, In the Unlikeliest of Places. We also discussed her novel, The Corset Maker, which was about her mother. And then she also discussed her latest book, Aftermath, which is an autobiography. And along the way, Annette shares what was surprising during her writing process, what it was like to dive into her father's stories through the tapes that he had recorded, and what books she likes to read, which is always fascinating when you speak with an author. I could go on and on about Annette, but I think it's time that she shares her journey and her advice with you. Annette, welcome. Welcome to Women Worldwide.
Thank you very much for having me, Deirdre. Good morning.
Well, good morning. I'd love to start off maybe just hearing a little bit about when you realized that you wanted to share your father's story and write your memoir in the unlikeliest of places.
Well, that was easy because he left me a so-called buried treasure. 3 years after my dad passed away, I was finally cleaning out his closet. I couldn't part with his things. We were very, very close. He spent the last 2 years of his life living with us. And there was a shoebox way at the back of the closet. I opened it up, expecting a pair of old shoes. And lo and behold, they were tapes. He recorded his life story in his native language, which was Yiddish, but also another set in English for the grandkids in case they never learned his language. So I had two fairly complete versions of his life. And of course, throughout his lifetime, he told me a great deal. So this was a wonderful supplement, and I played it as I wrote. So I sort of had him with me in my ear. It was just a treasure for me.
That is a treasure. You certainly didn't expect to find it. And you knew that you wanted to write at that point based on what your family experienced, and maybe you'll share a little bit about that experience, that trauma. Even though you were listening and writing, was it difficult to hear what you were hearing and what he was sharing during this process?
Some people might find it surprising, but actually it was not. Because I had heard those stories of the murder of about 6 dozen of relatives on both sides of the family in Poland by the Nazis since I was a little girl growing up in Poland. My father was a rare bird. He wanted to pass the stories on, even though they were painful. But he was also a man of great deal of optimism. So he always looked forward. Even though he told the stories of what happened, his outlook was forward looking, and he became a wonderful painter whose paintings look vibrant and young. I had sent us slides of his work to the museums in New York. And one curator said, these are paintings of a vibrant young man, and my father was in his 70s when he painted them. So that gives you a hint about his personality. So when he told these stories, he told what happened, matter of fact, but he told colorful stories of each person that was lost. So I felt I had them with me. It was almost when I was writing about them, I felt like I was, in a way, bringing them to life. I was remembering them, what they looked like, how they spoke, how they sang. So it wasn't a traumatic experience for me to write about it.
That's really fascinating. With his painting, are you saying with the vibrancy, were they hopeful and optimistic paintings? Sometimes when people experience things through their lives, they can take it could be a darker period or a brighter or a lighter. Was the optimism there in the painting?
You would be amazed. In every painting, there was music, there was nature, he painted only one painting called The Holocaust.
Mm.
All the other paintings were vibrant and upbeat. And it always amazed me.
That is really special. And some of these works are in New York in museums.
Yes, yes, they have been shown in many exhibitions.
Oh,
Yes, they are in the book. There is a few of them in the book, in the unlikeliest of places, and it has a story of how my mother, on her deathbed, persuaded him to begin painting because he
oh,
had wanted to paint all his life, but he didn't begin until after she passed away.
oh my. Well, do you remember your father ever sharing stories with you, or were those tapes the only stories that you had ever heard?
Oh no, I heard those stories directly from him since I was a young girl growing up in Poland. Oh yes, I
Were
I
there, oh,
I
good.
felt as though I had known all the people that were lost because he spoke so much about them.
Were there any stories or anything that really surprised you as you were listening and remembering?
Um,
The hard
yes,
question.
I was upset over again at this particular point where my father talked about how he begged his brothers and his sisters to join him on the escape from Poland when the Nazis invaded. It was a very dangerous escape, but my father felt things would get worse, and they certainly did. But the family said, "This is crazy. Our home is here, our furniture is here, we live here, we're not going anywhere." So he was the only one in his family that escaped, and he's the only one that survived, except, I should say, for one sister who survived Auschwitz and ended up in the US. But the rest of the family was murdered.
Oh my. Can you share a little bit about his escape and leaving Poland, what that was like?
Well, he had to go across the river Bug, which formed the border between Poland, which was now occupied by Germany, and the Soviet Union on the other side. And the two militaries on either side of the river were shooting at each other. So imagine trying to cross at night in a little boat from one shore to the other. It was taking your life in your hand. I think in the months of October and November 1939, about 50 or 60,000 people were killed just crossing the river. So it was not an easy option to undertake, but my father did. And of course, when he got to the Soviet Union, he was arrested and sentenced to labor in a gulag. So
Oh my.
even though it was a horrible experience and hundreds of his friends and thousands of people died in those gulags,
Mhm.
in a perverse kind of twist of fate, he survived. And my mother had a similar experience. She was also the only one in her family to escape.
How long was he in the gulag? Do you know?
2 years.
That is a stretch of time.
Well,
My goodness.
starvation, disease,
Mm.
rampant.
The strength he must have had physically as well as mentally to get through something like that is unbelievable.
I said, how did you survive? He said, I sang. Music saved me.
Music. Oh my goodness.
He had a beautiful singing voice. and he made his life better by singing.
Oh, there is something about singing that helps the body as well. Because when you sing and you hum, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which is so good for you. There is something to be said about that, and it helps your brain to be happier.
Yes, absolutely.
Clearly, that is fascinating that he was able to do this. Now, I want to talk a little bit about you as the writer of the memoir and going through all of the tapes. Is this you're a writer of different formats? When you wrote this memoir, was this among your first type? Was this your first published work, or were there
Yes,
others? It was.
my first. In the unlikeliest of places, the full title is How Nachman Libeskind Survived the Nazis, the Gulags, and Soviet Communism. That was my first. And
That's a huge undertaking.
it's a big swath of history that involved a lot of research as well.
Sure, sure. And how long did that take from all the listening as well as doing your own research?
I would say it was 4 or 5 years.
Easy. That must have been such an eye opener. Is a memoir your favorite type of writing, or is it poetry? Is it essays? Because I know you have different styles.
Um, I would say having completed and published a historical novel this past March, The Corset Maker, inspired by my mother's history. So I've written memoir and a historical novel, and I issued a volume of poetry called Erythra Thalassa Brain Disrupted. Erythra Thalassa are Greek words meaning the Red Sea. This is the image I saw when my son suffered a hemorrhagic stroke and his brain was bathed in blood.
Mm.
It was a horrible image. It was a devastating experience for him, but of course, as his mother, it was devastating for me as well. And I sort of try to heal myself by expressing my emotions in a poetry book. So I would say that poetry is my favorite genre because when you're writing a memoir, you have to stick to the truth. You can't embellish too much.
That's right.
If you're writing a historical novel, you have to stick to the historical facts. There's room for creativity in how you present it to your readers and how you configure your book. But you have, I think, the most freedom in poetry. Your mind can soar free as a bird. So poetry is my favorite, although I like writing. I like writing all sorts of things.
That's wonderful. Well, clearly creativity was in the family with your father who sang and was an artist and you with your different writing styles. That's pretty amazing. You mentioned the corset maker. Was your mother a corset maker?
You guessed correctly. My mother was a corset maker, and she opened her own corset shop when she was 18 years old with her friend in downtown Warsaw, which before World War II was considered the Paris of the East. It was a vibrant, uh, beautiful city, very cosmopolitan. And this girl had the gumption to open her own business because she was
Oh,
an
wow.
incredible designer. She designed beautiful corsets and brassieres, and she persuaded her girlfriend from school to join her, and they had
Amazing.
their own store on what would be like the Fifth Avenue of Warsaw, and so she continued her craft. It was really an art most of her life until she came to the U.S. and she couldn't do it here. But she did it in uh, Poland before the war. She did it in post-war Poland, which was quite amazing. Why? Because post-war Poland was a communist country.
Great.
Government did not appreciate private businesses. So she had a huge amount of harassment from tax authorities It was not just a private business, it was a private business ran by a woman. So that was, an extra reason to give her grief. And then she opened her shop when we moved to Israel. So she was an amazing woman, and she inspired me. And there were several of her friends who were also remarkable women, and I put all these women into this novel.
Oh, that sounds like such an interesting novel. And what strength, quite the entrepreneur to be
Yeah,
able to do that at a time in Poland. It sounds almost unheard of in that
unheard,
time frame.
especially the background that she came from. She came from a very Orthodox Jewish family, and that was just not done.
Great. Unbelievable. So you are surrounded by strength on both, right? Both sides of
And
the family. You could
strong,
look at it.
yeah, strong personalities, very strong.
Prominent. Absolutely. Was there ever a time, and this is focus on you, spotlight on you now, as you were going throughout your writing career, where something happened, it was either an aha moment or an uh-oh moment that really stood out for you as a writer?
Yeah, yes, and this is, when you're writing a book, sometimes you ask yourself, is this good enough? Is this going to be published? And my aha moment was to realize, if my only goal were to be published, then I should not write. You should write because you want to write. You should write because you want to express your thoughts, your ideas. But if your goal is to be published, that's not a good enough reason. That was my aha moment.
I love that. I think that probably prevents a lot of people from sharing their stories. The fear of, well, who's going to read it? Who's going to publish it? Why would a big publisher pick
Right.
up on it? When today you can self publish, which is really a viable option.
Yes, but I agree with you, but I really think you need to focus on the writing itself, on the craft of writing as good a story as you possibly can, and kind of put it on the periphery of your mind, the publishing.
Yes, no, I agree 100%. So, what keeps you today motivated, inspired to keep writing, to keep going?
What inspires me is the courage of my son, because he became severely disabled, a quadriplegic after a stroke.
Oh, my.
And his life is so difficult. He's a father of two young girls, and there he becomes completely immobile, requiring 24/7 care. And he is someone who never complains. He
No.
he looks at the positive things in life. He's thrilled that his daughter just started college, and and that's so inspirational to me. There's never a why me. And this is another reason why I'm so glad I published Erythra Thalassa, Brain Disrupted, a book of poetry about a mother who is devastated by what's happening to her son. And yet my son himself is accepting life and looking forward to whatever he can enjoy. I buy him the latest books on Audible. He listens to music. He just asked me the other day, Mom, do you think they have the Wall Street Journal on Audible? And I got it.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it inspires me. Actually, many years ago, before he had the stroke, he got me The Movable Feast by Hemingway, and he wrote a dedication inside and saying, Mom, I think you have in you the great American novel. You should write. So I said to him, Jeremy, I don't know if
He's a
you'll
big
live up to
supporter.
this, but I'm going to try.
You
So
know, you should.
he is the one that inspires me. And of course, what inspires me is the support of my family. My husband is my muse. He's wonderful. He's subjected to all the early drafts and gives me advice. My daughter is wonderful. She edits my work sometimes. So
Is she an editor by trade? Is that something that she
She,
does or
she,
just helps?
she's a lawyer by trade.
Excellent. Nice to have a lawyer in the family.
But she's a very good writer herself. So she's beginning to get her work published too. Enjoy.
Well, I'm curious, how has your life changed throughout your writing? So as an author, has that changed your lifestyle, the what you're able to do at all?
It has, actually, um, I have less time for my family, which is a problem. But, you know, as a writer, you're supposed to read. You need to read other writers. You,
Yes.
you need to read, but you also need to write. And of course, you need to promote your work through social media, which is not a favorite thing of mine. But, I'm told time and
It's a
again
necessary evil.
by my publisher, it's a necessary evil. It takes a lot of time. So, do you read? Do you write? Do you publish? Do you spend time with your family? It's attention. It's attention every single day. So that's the impact because you want to do each and you want to do it well. And most of all, I want to write.
Exactly. And you mentioned reading, and I know it's true. Every good writer reads a lot. So I'm curious, what kinds of books do you like to read?
I do like to read other memoirs. I like novels. I mean, I have a wide ranging taste in reading. I think uh, recently I finished a book by a woman named Hala Allen. She is a Palestinian author, and I wanted to read something by someone from another culture. And her book is The Arsonist City. It's a novel, but it's a novel about a Palestinian family in California and how they travel and scatter around the world in Beirut and go back to their country of origin. And what really touched me is that no matter our background, we were all the same. Families want the same thing. Children relate to their parents in very similar ways across cultures. So I found that very, very heartening. It's a very good novel. Right now, I'm reading a book by a journalist, a fabulous journalist, Andrew Nagorski. The book is called Saving Freud. And
Oh,
you would have thought that everything that can be said about Freud has been written, but no, Andrew Nagorski researched and found about a dozen people who helped and finally persuaded Freud to leave Austria for London in the 11th hour. He
oh
was ill,
my.
he was old, he didn't want to leave Austria. Vienna was his home, and it's a fascinating account. And I'm also reading.
Hmm.
My daughter gifted it for my birthday last week. A wonderful, different kind of book. It's called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, and
Oh,
it's
that's
a
different.
dictionary by John Koenig, who he tries to define new words for emotions we all have, but there's no word for.
Ah,
So it's very interesting. So as you see, those are three very very different kind of works. I just finished a novel by an Israeli author called Yeshua called The Retrospective, which is a wonderful account of an old film director uh, rediscovering his earliest films. It's fascinating. It's like watching five different movies in one novel.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing really good books. Saving Freud, and you said Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. Those two I'm
Yes.
going to put on my list. Thank
Good.
you. That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
I had the book launch for my latest memoir, Aftermath: Coming of Age on Three Continents, and Andrew Nagorski, the author of Saving Freud, did me the great honor of coming to my book launch,
oh my,
giving the historical context for my own story.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, how exciting. Well, I can't even believe it, Annette, that I'm going to ask you for parting advice. You've shared so many interesting facts and you've given advice, but if you could give some parting advice to the Women Worldwide Network, what would you say about sharing their stories that they might want to get out there? How can somebody do that?
I will tell you, I will pass on a piece of advice that I actually got from my father that's guided me. And that is simple. It's never too late. A lot of people say, "Oh, I could have done it, but I'm not, it's too late now." No, it's never too late. Whatever you want to do, if you have a passion for it, I don't care if you're 90, start learning the piano or write your book or whatever it is. One never knows how many years one has on this earth, right?
True.
But I have a lot of novels in my head, and I'm planning to get them out. I'm planning to travel next year, and I spoke to some friends who I was hoping would meet me in France, and some of them said, "Oh, gee, I don't even know if I'll be alive next year." And I said, "Well, I plan to be alive." You always need to look forward. You need to have something positive on your plans for the future. And I think that really makes a big difference in your attitude.
Oh, I agree. Make it simple. It's never too late. And look forward, look ahead. It's so true. That's great advice, Annette. Thank you so much. And last question, super easy. Where can people find out more about you and your books?
Okay, the easiest thing is to go to my website. It's my name, Annette Berkovits, Berkovits, AnnetteBerkovits.com. All my books are there. There's galleries of paintings and pictures and a gorgeous song that my son composed and lots of other things. And of course, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, they all have my books.
Excellent. And you mentioned social media. So if somebody did want to check out your social media, where would they go?
Well, I have a Facebook author, Annette Liebeskind Berkovits author page, and I'm occasionally on Twitter and
LinkedIn?
I don't do Instagram very well, so I need more instruction for my grandkids.
I'm sure they're willing to help.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your work and inspiration. This has just been such a delightful conversation. Thank you.
So much, Deirdre. I am so grateful. You're a terrific interviewer, and I enjoy speaking with you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into Women Worldwide. You know what I always say? Keep the feedback coming and the conversations going. You know where to find me on social media. I'm at Dee Breckenridge on Twitter, and you can always find me on LinkedIn. Okay, friends, until our next episode, stay focused, energized, and feeling empowered. Thank you.